Good afternoon. My name is Abdul Khan. I'm a supervising engineer with the California Department of Water Resources. And in this session, we are going to make two presentations on water budget. We have started two pilots to look at water budgets in the state of California. And the first presentation will be actually a very detailed analysis for the Tulare Lake hydrologic region, which I'm going to present. And then the next presentation, my colleague Paul Shipman, also from DWR, he's going to present not the entire water budget analysis we have undertaken for Central Coast hydrologic region, but a part of that analysis which relates to how we sort of address multi-cropping issues. So with that, I'll start. And this is the outline of presentation, just to give you some history and based on what we have found out within DWR in terms of how different programs actually go about doing water budget and whether there are inconsistencies in approaches in the vocabulary and the data we use. And then based on the analysis, we actually came up with a vision and a process to achieve that vision. I'm going to talk a little bit about that and then talk about the water budget framework project and then the accomplishments. And this will be mostly related the outcomes from the Tulare Lake hydrologic region pilot and some next steps. I'm just going to talk about it. I don't have any slide for that. So this is the history, and this morning you saw the water supply and balance modernization. This is actually has been happening with water plan for the last many years. So we look at water budget by the detailed analysis unit, which then is aggregated to planning area and then hydrologic region. And the focus of that approach is essentially supply and use. And in parallel, in our Bay Delta office, there had been a process where they actually looked at a more comprehensive integrated surface water groundwater model called Integrated Water Flow Model, or IWFM. And application of that IWFM model with data from Central Valley is known as C2V-SIM. And the advantage of this IWFM or C2V-SIM approach is it's looking at the whole system, how the system interacts with each other, whether it's land surface, the conveyance, the stream, the subsurface, and the groundwater system, and bring this whole thing together. So as we were reviewing the water budget done by different programs, we actually came to the conclusion, and this was a group of DWR staff across programs and our region office and so on. We thought we really need to come to terms with how we can bring consistency in our data approach and overall, water budget estimates. So as part of this process, we actually developed a vision statement. And the thing I want to highlight in the vision statement is we need to have a defensible method. And not only that, it needs to be watershed based. And this was actually a big discussion in the morning session. A lot of participants in the morning session, they're talking about somehow we need to address water management on a watershed scale. And then the third thing is it should have the flexibility, look at various spatial and temporal scales. And then finally, hopefully, this will lead to a place where we'll have consistent water budgets across DWR programs and perhaps even across state programs, and then also across spatial and temporal scales. So the way we achieve this is, again, the basic building block is data. And then the other thing is we need to be talking in the same language, the terminology. We need to have consistent terminology and then consistent methods. So the goal is once we have that, DWR actually will be able to build the capacity to do a proper job in terms of having water budgets for each of the hydrologic region and eventually for the state as a whole. And so once we have that, then certainly the state can provide the technical assistance necessary to help the local agencies as well. So this is, in a nutshell, the water budget framework project. As I mentioned, we looked at the current methods and data within DWR. We want to define a consistent method with the common vocabulary, and then ultimately develop a water budget framework which can be used in different hydrologic regions. And then as a starting point, what we did, as I mentioned, we did two pilot studies, the result of which I'm going to present now is the Tulare hydrologic region, and then this phase 2, the Central Coast hydrologic region pilot, it's currently being done. You will see a sort of like a snapshot of that in Paul's presentation. So the outcome from this project was we did develop a common vocabulary with a total water budget schematic, which basically sort of illustrates how subsystems interact with each other and how they basically come together as a whole system. Then as we went through the process, we looked at the data and resolved a lot of inconsistencies, how data are used in the water plan process and the C2VC model. And then finally, internally, we were struggling with this reams of information of data and outputs and results. C2VC is a monthly model, and it's a finite element model, so a lot of information is generated by that model. So water budget dashboard was our way, and I'll give you a live demonstration, otherwise I'll go to the slides, but hopefully a live demonstration, how we have been able to organize the information so that it is easy to understand and it is easy to share and communicate to stakeholders and the people who are interested in water budgets. So we also had local agency interaction with different advisory groups. These are actually advisory groups who actually part of the DWR Sigma process. And then all the analysis we have done are actually documented in a technical memorandum. And currently this one is going executive review, and hopefully in sometime in the future we'll be able to release it to the public. So this is what I was talking about. As you can see, this is our sort of our depiction of the water budget, which includes the whole system, the land surface, the river, the conveyance, and the groundwater system, and the subsurface, and the lake and reservoir. And then when you see these arrows, these are actually flow of water from one system to another or within system. For example, the blue arrows, these are actually inflows which are coming into this, what we are defining as a water budget zone, an area for which we are trying to calculate water budget. And then this orange arrows is essentially flows which is going out of the system. And then the green arrows, it's essentially flow between the system, which actually shows the interaction of the different subsystems which make up the total system. And then to go along with that 3D schematic, we actually, this was actually done over some period of time as the different programs and the region office interacted, staff from region office interacted with each other, and we were eventually sort of defined each of the terms which make up this total system depiction of water budget. So this is just a subset, just to give you some example. It's actually, it's a few pages long. So I just want to illustrate one of the results. This is actually where we started as we were looking at the two programs. So this, the top line is this was based on calcimeter model being used for the water plan. And this is the C2VSIM model used in, that's the fully integrated groundwater, surface water hydrologic model. So you can see it's about a 3 million acre feet of difference. It's a large number. So when we saw that, we started investigating what were the problems. And we found out there were problems in all of these, whether it's crop acreage, crop mix, irrigation efficiency, irrigation periods, and some of the soil and irrigation parameters. So we made them consistent, sort of equal in both the models. And this is the result. As you can see, they are actually very close. The point is, and this is actually relate to actually our last session as well, and the next session, that the end use and the AB 1755. When you have the right data, most of the time you'll find people, the method or the tool, analytical tool people are using, folks are using, they're probably mostly okay. It's the data where most of the problem comes in. So this is really important to have consistent and defensible data. So with that, actually, I'll try to go to the water budget dashboard online. So this dashboard was, again, our way to sort of look at the information in such a way that we can make sense out of it. Because otherwise, what happens in C2VSIM, IWFM, they produce a lot of information, lot of long tables, and you can graph them, but still very difficult to decipher and understand what's going on. So let me try to go to the dashboard and see whether it is more helpful. Let's see. Taking a little bit time. Go full screen. Full screen is not working. Let me try. I think this is good enough. So what we have here is a series of sort of tabs to organize the water budget information. And these are based on the water budget dashboard you see here is based on outputs and data from C2VSIM model for 2001 through 2009 period, a 10-year period. In a way, it's sort of like a recent 10-year conditions. So the first tab is what we have is the base map, and it's essentially sort of giving me a geographical perspective of the domain of analysis. So we have C2VSIM, these are the subregions, the modeling subregions, which are also equivalent to, approximately equivalent to the planning area, which are used as some sort of special domain for water plan analysis. And then I'm not going to go over everything, but just to give you some sampling of. So this is, again, the C2VSIM, the modeling region and the stream system. Then the Bulletin 118, the groundwater basins. And then some C2B sim grid. And to start with, what we show here is for, it's not coming the whole screen, but anyway. So what we show here is this is a way to organize the crop and water demand and supply information. And in the central panel, the top view, we have the demand, the urban and ag supply, urban and ag demand, and then the supply, the surface and groundwater. And then on the right-hand side panel, it's basically the modeling region or the planning area of interest. It's sort of illustrated that area. And then we can step through each one of the subregion, and sort of you see this changing. So this is essentially for the modeling subregion 15. We are seeing the demand and supply, and in the central panel, the bottom view is the crop acreage, and it's the relative proportion of the crop acreages. So I'm going to quickly go through all of them, but then maybe just step through for the entire Tulare hydrologic region. And the other thing you can see, in the top panel, the size of these pie charts is changing. So these are actually proportional. So when you see a large sort of pie, it means it's proportioned to the overall acreage for the Tulare Lake hydrologic region. The bottom panel, it's not proportional. You see it's a constant value. It's more like proportion based on the total acreage for that particular subregion. Let me quickly step through it. And so, all right. And for Tulare Lake, so you'll see that obviously these become much larger. And for Tulare Lake, what I'm going to do is also step through the time selector at the bottom. So this is the situation in year 2000. And I want you to watch. We know all of these, but for me, it is a revelation when you see that changing in a sort of like in this environment. I would like you to focus on the almond and pistachio and the cotton, quite a bit of cotton and a little bit of almond and pistachio. And then let's, so this transition is happening, and it's a visual display of this transition. Cotton is getting less and less. This is 2006, then 2007, and then 2008. So all of us know that we are, sort of cotton production is going down, and it's been converted to almond and pistachio. So this is a way to sort of depict that in a graphical environment. So with that, water budget schematics, I'm not going to go over. I've already shown you this, but I'm going to move over to the next tab. So as we were developing this water budget dashboard, we were struggling to we initially put out a lot of detailed information, and even internally within our team, we were struggling to, understand everything. So as we went through that process, we came up with this sort of like notion that we need to do some sort of progressive elaboration, meaning look at the high-level information and then gradually sort of go into more detailed information. So this is again for the different hydrologic regions. In the middle panel, the top view again is demand and supply. And then the middle panel is a sort of like the groundwater budget. It's in entirety. We do not show what are the components of inflow or outflow. It's essentially total inflow, total outflow, and the change in storage. And on the right-hand side on the map, what you see is the hydrologic region. And then these arrows actually, when it's blue arrow, you'll see that there are also orange arrows. The blue arrows actually show the subsurface inflow coming to that selected region or region of modeling region of interest from the adjacent regions. So like, say, for example, 57 here is the inflow coming from the modeling subregion 15 into modeling subregion 14. So what I'm going to go, maybe skip through, but show you some of these. And so here you see that there is this orange arrow. It is an outflow from the planning area or modeling subregion of interest into the adjacent area. Let me go over to another area. Same thing. And then I'm going to move over to Tulare Lake hydrologic region. Again, I'm going to step through. So watch this groundwater budget and see what happens. The other thing I want to note here is in this year 2000, there is within parentheses 93%. This is actually in water plan, we use some sort of like precipitation index, which means this is the total precipitation for that water year relative to the average precipitation for the last 30 years. So in a way, 93% is some sort of, close to being average precipitation year. And this is an indirect sort of estimate of wetness or dryness of that particular water year. So I'm going to step through the year, and I would like you to watch what happens. So this is the 85% year, and so we have large groundwater pumping, not so much surface water supply, and the depletion of the storage continues. Same thing, again, large groundwater pumping, depletion continues, and it's 71% year, and 2003, same thing, 2004, continues depletion. So 2005, this is 120% year. And you see that surface water supply has increased. And as a result, there is less groundwater pumping. And we have more groundwater flow than outflow. And then as a result of that, we have some recovery of the system, the groundwater system. And let's move to the next year. Again, this is a 123% year. We have more surface water, and we have some recovery again. And this is a little bit less than previous year, and we are investigating why it is so. One of the reasons could be that there was a little bit more groundwater pumping than the previous year, so the recovery was not as great as 2005. And then let's move on to 2007, a very dry year, 50%. Suddenly, we don't have much surface water, a lot of groundwater pumping, and we go back to that depletion of the system again. And I presume this will continue through 2008, 77% year, it continues. And then 2009, it continues. And the other thing I want to mention, when we are looking at the whole system, Tulare Lake as a whole, you see all the arrows are actually blue. So these are actually sort of like a system subsurface exchange between different planning area or modeling subregion. And the other thing I forgot to mention, these arrows are actually proportioned based on the actual value of the subsurface flow. So this one is 117, and then we have here a 7, which is obviously proportioned consistently. So even without looking at the number, we know what are the sort of the relative volume of subsurface exchange. And then finally, this is the average, 10-year average for the Tulare Lake hydrologic region. The other thing, because of the way the screen is working, I could not show you here. We also have this in the central panel, there is a bottom view, which essentially gives a sort of composite net groundwater recharge and discharge to and from the river system. So I'm going to, so as I was saying that this is the high level picture of things. And actually we started here, which I'm going to show, which we're calling water by subregions. And to save some time, I'm not going to step through each of the planning area now, but just show for Tulare Lake. So essentially what this one is sort of giving a more granular look to the inflow and outflow. So we have this, the central panel, the top view. We have the deep park, and then subsurface flow. Anywhere where you actually cannot see a number, you can just hover over it, and you actually find out what the particular component is, and also the associated value. So then the gain from stream, and then other inflows, and similarly for the outflow, and then the change in storage. And we also have the same information for folks who like tables more than graphs in a tabular form. So this is for the sort of like the average value for the Tulare Lake hydrologic region for the entire 10-year period. And then along with the groundwater system, we also have the budget for the land surface system. And similarly, it's a graph, and then we have a set of inflows. The important thing to note here, and this confuses a lot of people, even internally within DWR, all on a sudden, groundwater supply, instead of becoming an outflow, it becomes an inflow, because this is, we are looking what is coming to the land surface to help us, you know, sort of grow our crops and also provide for municipal and urban water supply. So groundwater supply here is an inflow as opposed to the groundwater system budget. And then deep percolation here is an outflow. But in the groundwater system, deep percolation was actually a inflow to the system. So these are the variations, and that's the reason we actually, along with the total and the groundwater system budget, we want to depict all the other relevant subsystems. And I need to move a little bit faster so that I can give enough time. So, and similarly, this is for the entire water budget system. So it's looking at, if you recall in the schematic, the orange arrows and the blue arrows, not the green arrows. So these are actually all the orange and green arrows in that schematic. I'm going to move over to the this is actually the groundwater budget. Now you're looking at the groundwater by basin, and it's a same set of information, but it's the groundwater basin budget for each of the groundwater basins in Tulare hydrologic region. I'm going to just show you a couple of them and then move over to the next tab. I really need to finish in the next 3 minutes so that I give some time to Paul. And then, this is what Jennifer mentioned previously at the butterfly chart. And we have that for the groundwater system, the land surface system, and water budget system. Essentially, it's showing the entire water budget for the entire period of analysis from 2000 to 2009. The only thing I want to mention here is for the groundwater budget system is whenever we have depletion in the system, we put the depletion as an inflow so that the bars on the two sides of this butterfly chart are equal. So let me go to Tulare Lake, then it will be easier. And then if you have accretion, it's actually put in the outflow so that, again, on the two sides we have equal length. And finally, I'm not going to show you this. This is our final water budget schematic, which I show, but all the components and the numbers are at this time cannot be extracted very easily from C2V-SIM model. We actually have a series of enhancements in future which we plan to implement to be able to do that. But I'm going to show you our all these numbers on our version 1 of the 3D schematic. And I'm going to go to Tulare Lake. And I'm going to, again, step through the time so that you see what happened. This is the total system description. So bringing all the system together in a 3D environment, so to speak. So just watch out for the surface water inflow, precip, and the pumping, and the change in storage. These are, as you remember, up to 2004, we had this dry water years. So large pumping, relatively smaller precip and surface water inflow, and then large depletions up to 2004. And then 2004, if you recall, it's a 128%, 20% year. We have sizable increase in the precip and surface water inflow. Groundwater pumping is much less, and then suddenly we have this sort of recovery of the groundwater system. And the same thing continues in 2006, 123% year, little bit more pumping. So maybe that's the reason the depletion, the accretion is not as much as in 2005. But 2007, again, a 50% year, the precip and surface water inflow relatively a lot less. So huge groundwater pumping and the depletion continues. And I'm just going to go quickly and finish so that I give at least 10 minutes to Paul. All right, so that's the water budget dashboard. So what we're going to do, let Paul finish his presentation, and then we'll take questions at the same time, right? Thank you. All right, so Paul. This one. Okay, this one. All right. Oh, okay. This one works if you want to.
Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Shipman from the Department of Water Resources. I'm a water resource engineer, and I'm here to present kind of a snapshot of where we are in the Central Coast Hydrologic region. And although I'm the one presenting it, there's been a large team involved with all this work, and a lot of credit goes to them as well. This is the Central Coast Hydrologic region from Santa Cruz down to Santa Barbara. So what is multi-cropping? That's what I'm talking about. Multi-cropping occurs when the same or different crops are grown multiple times, or more than one time basically throughout the year. It's very difficult for land use surveys to detect this exactly because they're typically done only once a year, so they don't capture the various different crops that grow in this period. Because of that, historically, we've lumped many multi-crops together into just miscellaneous truck crops and simply adjusted numbers based off professional judgment. So what was the purpose of what we're doing? We were trying to create an approach to analyze multi-cropping that is transparent, defensible, reproducible, has clearly identified assumptions so that we can go back and adjust those assumptions as we get better information. Or if one of the assumptions could be wrong, could be easily corrected. So some of the challenges that we're facing was that while the crops in the truck crop category were typically have similar crop coefficients, many of them have very different irrigation periods and duration, or start times and durations, which was leading the lumped approach to not create as precise numbers as we were hoping for. In addition to that, crop rotations are often considered a secret. When you get a better price, if you get your crop to the market than your neighbor, if you're a week early or a week late, you're less likely to want to share what your rotation is. So that makes it a lot harder to get accurate information on when crops are being grown. And another challenge too is that we don't have an integrated hydrologic model in the Central Coast region, unlike the Tulare Lake. So what data sources we did have, we used the DWR county land use surveys, we used the Ag Commissioner's reports, we used the California Pesticide Information Portal, which was actually a critical resource for this analysis we'll talk about. We used advice from the farm advisor and the local farm advisor in the area, and we used the Monterey County Water Resources Agency has a variety of reporting programs with very useful data to compare against. So the California Pesticide Information Portal keeps a record of pesticide use throughout California. It's at a township range section scale, which was very useful for analysis purposes. It could be combined into a DAU, which is a detailed analysis unit, in order to get a picture of what kind of pesticides were being applied and when they were being applied. There's actually a huge wealth of information in here. Some of it has some QA/QC problems, but it was very overwhelming when we first looked at it, and so we struggled a little bit trying to figure out a way to, reliably and quickly process that information. And here we got help from Randy Hansen and Wesley Henson from the USGS. They came up with this idea of binning applications into months, which really helped, kind of make the data a lot more understandable. Eliminated a lot of the scatter that's caused by those disparate start dates and allowed you to see a lot more of a trend happening. We also used the farm advisor information. Like I said, Michael Kahn was nice enough to provide us with some real start and end times for a lot of different crops. There's more than just this. It's just an example that were being grown, so we could compare, look at those, and try to create some crop periods. And so then we had to really take that information and the data and transform it into information, which is what we try to do in the, I don't know how to do the pointer part, but the red box there, we're taking this data that we've gotten from the two sources and transforming it into a distribution of broccoli throughout the year into these 3 different growing periods. This is something we didn't have a reliable way of doing before. This is 2014. What I'm going to show next is that there is significant temporal variability. So this is 2002 for comparison. As you see, it's got a very different trend in terms of how these crops were grown. In addition to temporal variability, another thing that's a challenge is spatial variability. Here are 4 DAUs that are all in the Salinas Valley, but as you see, they all have very different distributions of broccoli. So without this ability to really figure out what's being grown when, we wouldn't have a way to capture this variability, which was enabled by using the CalPIP data. So here's kind of the full information for 2011. As you can see, we've separated out 7 different crops that represented the largest individual crops being grown during that time, and then went ahead and still continued including the rest of them as miscellaneous, but separated them out into various crop periods with durations that were applicable to the crop itself. Then we had to take that information and use it in some way to get applied water from there to check our assumptions. So we used the calcimetol model, which is a daily soil water balance model. It specializes in estimating evapotranspiration and applied water. We plugged our information that we generated into that. And so the preliminary results are very promising. Right now, the years we've tested are within 10% of reported measured use in areas where we have reported measured use. It's mainly Monterey County. And interestingly enough, although it wasn't a requirement, it also has close correspondence with previous water plan results. So the next steps for us is to continue to refine the estimates, make sure we've put in everything correctly, and then generate full information from 2002 to 2015 that will then be used in the water budgets. Eventually we'll create dashboards similar to what we created for Tulare Lake for the Central Coast. And then kind of recommendation for future studies. One of the largest assumptions we had to make was downscaling county ag numbers to detailed analysis units for multi-cropped areas. Unfortunately, this had to be done just based off of a ratio of rotational crops to the county versus rotational crops to the DAU, because there was not a reliable source we could find for how much specifically broccoli was being grown at a DAU level. Another place that we could increase accuracy would be to, be able to share it with locals and to get feedback on, does this look accurate? Is this reasonable, or have we missed the mark on some of these periods? And finally, one issue, baby greens or items that are cut multiple times, like salad lettuce, that stays in the rapid growth cycle. But it's not currently being modeled that way. It's currently being modeled the same way as other crops with a full maturation. And that's all my presentation. Sorry, I had to go a little fast because we're short on time. But we'd be happy to answer questions. I'm sure we'll come back up to answer questions too.
One thing I want to mention, probably Paul can guide you on that. As part of the Sigma process, we have recently published 2 frequently answered questions, and these were actually questions we received as part of the local agency interaction that I showed in one of the slides. And Paul probably can help you how to easily get to that. And so there are 2 sets. One is water budget modeling, and it's as it relates to Sigma regulations. And the other is more technically oriented, and it addresses questions related to water budget and the water budget dashboard. And the reason I'm mentioning all of these is in the water budget, FAQ of the water budget, actually you can connect with the water budget dashboard I showed you, and you can play around and look at it and provide us feedback and so on. Paul, can you direct them how to quickly go to those to FAQs?
If you wanted to find those resources, those are available on our DWR Sigma website. The regulatory facts are listed on the Groundwater Sustainability Plan regulation page, and then the facts on the dashboards are available underneath resources, data tools, and reports.
So we'll be happy to answer any questions. Right. So currently, yes. So the question is, actually, I can hand over to you this one. We can answer from here, right? Yeah. So yeah. So the question was, we have shown results from 2001 through 2009, when we are going to have these results or the information extended up to 2015 or 16. So currently, actually, we currently have one project going on, and very soon we are going to start another parallel project. So the current project we are doing is essentially migrating the analysis I have shown for C2BSIM IWFM construct to a newer version of IWFM, which gives us a little bit more flexibility in terms of what kind of information we can generate. And so that's the engine part, the modeling tool part. The second part is simultaneously we are putting in information up to 2015, and some of the information are more granular in nature in terms of the diversion and the land use and the applied water from the diversion and so on. So that's a modeling part. And pretty soon we are actually going to start a process we have used for Tulare Lake, is once we have this information built up for the model, we are actually start the process of, again, interacting with both DWR's region office and through them the local agencies, so that we can actually check out these numbers and do any necessary modifications both in the input data or any of the associated parameters which we use in the model. So the very raw version of the this extended 2015 data, we are just saying early 2018, and I don't know what it means. It probably means maybe March, April timeline, and then when we start the other process in terms of reconciling the information and vetting the information, my thought is it will be sometime in July next year, which when we may have a version which will be then sort of include input from DWR's region office and the local agencies, and also which will probably able to ingest into the water budget dashboard. And I just want to mention the water budget dashboard actually is built on a tool called Tableau. So we are getting the information from the outputs from C2VSIM model, and that information is basically ingested into this Tableau environment, and all the interactions and the maps and the figures are actually built on Tableau. All right. Any other questions for Paul or me? Yeah.
Yes. You showed lateral movement of water, groundwater.
Correct.
So outside Tulare Lake Basin, right, coming off of maybe the western slope, primarily of the Sierra Nevada. So that implies potentially groundwater depletion outside the designated basin areas. And so there's that going on as well.
That is actually one of the current deficiencies in the C2VSIM model, that all these, what we call in C2VSIM terminology, the groundwater basin valley floor, those are actually fully detailed out, and it actually is a finite element grade, fully integrated surface water groundwater model. But the boundary watersheds which feed into this valley floor, those are actually simulated in a much simpler way. And actually recently I was in another meeting, actually a presentation, Aqua, and I think I met, I don't know who he represents, John Mills, and he said they have some much better framework to incorporate this information to the C2VSIM. So this is some dialogue we need to start, because the focus was really the highly extracted alluvial groundwater basin. Originally when C2VSIM developed, the boundary watersheds were not simulated in a as fine a way as it should be. So that is something actually, as I mentioned, that as part of this process, we are actually recommending a series of enhancements for both IWFM and C2VSIM. So hopefully in some future time, we'll be able to incorporate better information in that regard. All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, sure, certainly.
So with the dashboard or through Sigma, I'm not quite certain, will you be able to do a profile of what the groundwater levels are throughout the Tulare Lake hydrologic region?
Yes. Yeah, the dashboard, in a way, it's a communication and sharing of information tool. Dashboard per se, it does not, basically produce any information. It basically integrates and shows the information. So yes, in terms of one of the suggestions when we presented this one to the Sigma advisory group in Tulare Lake Hydrologic region. They were really interested, and we have added that one of the enhancements we need to do to the dashboard. They suggested two things. One is along with the subsurface flow exchange, actually show the groundwater level contour, both the simulated from C2BSIM and also based on groundwater wells data available in that area. So essentially, that will give sort of, in a way, more validity to this subsurface exchange. And one thing I did not mention, the arrow direction is generally correct as far as it's showing the movement of water from one modeling region to other. It does not really show it may be like this, or that. So that is something I think we need to incorporate to sort of have a higher level of defensibility of the subsurface flow numbers. And we intend to do that in sometime in future. And there is a series of enhancements which are being planned, and we'll have to phase it because of both resources availability, DWR staff time availability, and so on. But as when we publish the technical memorandum, actually there are 4-page recommendations in terms of enhancing, both C2BSIM and the data and the dashboard and IWFM model. But we are in the midst of actually developing a work plan up to 2018 December right now, and we'll prioritize based on the input we received from the stakeholders and basically go one at a time. So maybe we'll do 5 of the recommendations over the next 1 year and then pick up the next 5 in the year after and so on. We do not know, but it will be a stepwise process. But the groundwater and other thing, actually, stakeholders were really interested in. We were not able to show you the stream system budget because there are some issues how you extract the information from IWFM C2BSIM in a consistent way, which makes sense. So other thing stakeholders were really interested in looking at is the stream system budget along the stream system, some sort of interaction with the groundwater system. How does it evolve, for example, from year to year? But some folks were actually much more interested. And this morning, I think Daniel mentioned seasonal. How does it change seasonally? The interaction of the stream system with the groundwater system. So these two are will be very high priority for us in terms of getting the information, extract the information from C2BSIM, and also have that displayed in the dashboard. All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Bruce.
That really brought to the surface something I've been pondering on this for the Tulare Basin in particular. As conductivity or total dissolved solids come up as another indicator, so you can see that temporal relationship between groundwater pumping and surface water. And I know some areas that the farmers around will pay one farmer not to pump because of what he's going to pull up and put into their own zone of depression and that type of thing. So I don't know if it's come up as a part of your water budget in a closed basin like that, but dissolved solids and salinity over time can show you that interrelationship.
Yeah, this is something actually C2BSIM does not have any water quality component. It's basically a flow model, flow-based model. And actually one of our recommendations, and we may actually may pick it up much earlier than we originally planned, is sort of building a water quality component into C2BSIM, both salt movements and salt migration and so on. So hopefully once we do that, I think we can address questions related to the one you asked. But right now, it's a flow essentially, and if you have to do something related to anything salts movement or water quality, it will be it cannot be done using C2BSIM at this moment. Any other questions or thoughts or comments? Yes.
I just would like to see whether the tool like for water budget or for soil water balance is available online for open source user, or is it only for specific like California?
Every tool we've used in our analysis is available to anybody. The calcimeter is available for use, I believe, and so is C2V Sim. It's available for free download on our website.
Yeah. Water budget dashboard. Yeah, C2V Sim, IWFM, calcimeter, those are available. Water budget dashboard actually was built on this Tableau environment. It's not a shareware or freeware. It's a proprietary tool. So at this time, you can actually use it, look at it, but you cannot necessarily unless you have license for Tableau, you cannot make changes as yet. And this has been an ongoing discussion in our team that how we can make this available to stakeholders so that they can use that for their area of information. Because some of the requests we got so far actually were from agencies, and we have not been able to actually even provide this to them because we're still doing some final review and checking, although we note in several places that it's preliminary results subject to major revisions and so on. So the requests we have gotten so far from the agencies, they actually have Tableau, so that's the reason they were very interested in trying to play out and put in their own information and develop similar dashboards for their areas. But it's not the dashboard is still not what you call open source. All right. Okay. So we are. Thank you very much for coming. So our session will be signing off now, but after 10 minutes, we'll reconvene, and there will be another fantastic session. And this is DWR has been thinking about this for a long time, but it will talk about some of the remote sense application to get land use data, and we have a fantastic visualization tool. So look at the land use data. So I welcome all of you to rejoin us after 10 minutes. Thank you.